So to get going, imagine that I jointed and planed these boards, because I did, but I didn't film it. And then I ripped them down with my table saw here. And I have an underpowered table saw, so it quit in the middle of it, and whatever. That is what it is. Here I'm marking where the legs are going to be and where the bench is going to be for this waterfall bench. And that way I can then make the marks for my biscuit joints that I'm going to use to line these things up when I glue them together, which I just did there. And now you see me cutting in the biscuits on both boards. They don't really help with anything structural, but they do help with lining things out when you're gluing them. I just think you get a little bit better seam when you have some sort of joiner in there. And I like biscuits because they're cheap and they're easy, and you don't have to be super precise when you cut them in. This was a bad step here. I should not have done this. I never do this. I don't know why I did, but I sanded down the seams there to try and make things fit together a little bit better, and you'll soon see that they didn't fit together better. They actually ended up fitting together worse. So don't do that. Don't sand the seams that you're about to glue together, which is what I'm doing right here. If you're getting into woodworking, one of the main things that you probably want to buy off the bat are these pipe clamps that I'm using here. Really important. I use them for almost every project, and you can't not have them. This step here, I like to clamp the boards to the pipe clamps, and when you squeeze together those pipe clamps, it'll usually lift up on one side, and then I think if you leave it like that, you get a not flat panel when you glue things up. But if you clamp the boards to the pipe clamps, it keeps them held down, and then everything compresses together flat on the plane of the pipe clamps. But it's a little thing I use. I think it makes it better. So here I'm cutting this panel in half, and that's because like I said earlier, I used the sander on the seams, and then when I tried to glue them together, it didn't really work all that well. And I didn't like the gaps, so I'm going to cut them down and re-glue them. And while those are gluing back up, I decided to add in some bow ties to these cracks that are on the legs. And this is my bow tie process. I just kind of, there's templates that you can use for this where you just run the router around the template, and those are cool, I guess. But if you just like a little careful while you do it, you can do it without a template. And then come in with your chisel and get it all tight. Glue, hammer, mash her in there, and cut it off with your pull saw. And then you're going to want to eventually hit it with the sander and make it flat. Well, you get a pretty little bow tie design there. And then fill in the crack with some glue if you want, and then sawdust. And that's how I fill cracks, is glue and sawdust. Looks pretty good most of the time. And then I sand. And sand and sand some more. If you're getting into woodworking, you better love sanding, because most of woodworking is sanding. Now it's time to cut the legs away from what will be the base of this bench. So I set my track saw to 45 degrees and I run it through. I usually take 2 passes, so that way I'm not overloading the saw, and I think you get less deflection with the blade, so you get a better joint there when you cut twice. And my track saw doesn't go the full depth of 8/4 wood, so there's like 1/8 of an inch that I always have to cut out with the pull saw. So I'm going to cut that out and then smooth everything out with the sander later. This is the other side, doing the exact same thing, but struggling for some reason. Yeah, look at that. Nice and slow is the way to go. Anyway, more pull saw time. I don't know why I filmed this twice. It's kind of irrelevant information, so sorry if you're watching it at this point. So when you make that 45-degree cut, you need to do another cut on either the bench or the legs, and it just depends on which way you run the saw through at the angle. For me, the side that needed cut off was on both legs, and so I did that. And save that off cut. That can be used later for the glue up of the legs to the base. This is a technique that I haven't seen yet that I developed, and I don't think that you get perfect 45s when you cut this with a track saw. And so they'll be a little bit off, and that'll mess up your dominoes and make it hard for these to come together. And so what I'm doing here is I'm using these little wood right angle clampy doodads, I don't know what you would actually call those, to secure the legs to the base. So I taped it and then folded it up and then added these guys in, and I got a little spacer block between the actual base and the clampy doodads, and that's because of what I'm going to do here. So take the tape off and then grab your track saw again, and I'm going to line that up just a little shy of the actual seam, so that way I take some material out of the tabletop and the base. And so I'm recutting this with it in a 45-degree position. And what this is going to do is it's going to make everything line up just so, and I'm going to get a way tighter seam than if I try to marry up two separate 45-degree cuts. I'm using 2 dominoes for this bench on either leg, and I know you might be thinking that's not enough, and you might be right, but you're probably not. When this all glues together, those 2 dominoes, those are holding things together, and really they're just holding it in place. It's not like ultra structural. The way a bench works, like when you sit on it, the pressure is going to go through the base, through the legs to the floor, and so any more dominoes than that's just kind of overkill in my opinion. So cut the ends off to make them flat so it sits flat, and then I'm going to do all my router work to trim up the edges. So for this one, I cut the inside edges with the round over bit before I glue everything together, and that's because you will not be able to cut those edges once you glue them together. That's just the mechanics of routers and 45-degree angles. They don't work on inside 45-degree angles. You always have to like clean them up and do some chisel work if you do it that way. But if you cut them before you glue them up, then everything slides together just nice. And there's no more router work to do after that. So again, showing you more than you needed to see, this is me cutting the inside edges of the bench top. That's how a router works. You get it. And here I'm taping off with masking tape the inside edges of the tabletop or the bench top and the bench legs. And this way when I clamp everything together, the glue squeeze out on the inside edge will mostly go on the tape, and there's going to be less sanding down the road. So when I said earlier, save the offcut from the legs, this is what I mean. You can cut that offcut into little pieces and you get perfect little 45-degree cauls that you'll then use to clamp things together. So I'm just using super glue and the accelerator. I don't know what brand that is. It's what's at my local shop. So add your glue in, spread it all around, get in those domino holes or whatever, dowel holes, whatever you're using when you're building this thing. And hammer those in place, drop the leg in, and then hit those cauls with clamps. So everything sucks in perfect. And then I'm going to add this guy in, a little clampy doodad, so that as this thing is drying, I know it's exactly at 45 degrees. Tighten those up, not too tight. They'll pop off if you get them too tight. And then do the exact same thing on the other side. I hope I haven't scared you off with all this redundant video footage. Sorry about that. I'll do better next time. Yeah, clamp them up. And then floors are often not flat, so I like to add in little inserts and feet on all the projects that I make. Benches, tables, bookcases, whatever. So I use Forstner bits. I cut out a larger space with a three-quarter inch bit, and then on the inside, I cut a 3/8 inch hole for these little steel inserts that I get on Amazon. And then you just wind them in with your Allen wrench. And this one cracked the leg, which is frustrating, but not that big of a problem. And I'll show you what I did to fix that crack. I don't know if you can see it with this camera angle, but there's definitely a split that happened when I sank that insert. Those are the cute little feet I got also on Amazon. So here, that's the crack that was made by that insert. Spread some glue around and then hit it with a couple clamps and let that dry up. And you can't even see that it was there. A lot of people use tape when they put these cauls on, so they do masking tape on the piece and then they glue them on, and that's fine. But a little like quick chisel work and a sander, and it all goes away, so you can skip the tape part if you want, or use a tape. I don't care what you do. So here I am routing the outside edge, and on the bench top I'm going to route to the end, but on the legs, at the corner where the legs meet the base, or the legs meet the bench top, I don't route all the way up to the top, and that's because the bearing of the router will follow the edge, and you round it off the bench top edge, so it'll follow that round edge and it'll cut in and it'll look like crap. And so you route up to that top edge, and I think I'm going to show you a little bit. You can see it right there. See how it juts out right at the end? I just want to save that piece, and I'm going to try and cut right up next to it, and then do the rest of the work with the sander. And I believe you can see that here. So you just right up and then pull it straight off, and then finish her off with the sander, and that way everything is flush and smooth. And then the bench is built, and the fun part starts. The sanding. Sand and sand and sand. The more you sand, the better it looks. I sanded a lot longer than that, to be fair. Then I put on my finish coat, which I use Rubio Monocoat Pure, like everybody else. Everyone uses this stuff because it's so easy and it looks so good. So I spread her around, and then I'm using 3M buffing pads to really rub it down into the grain, and then get a rag and wipe it off as best you can. You can't get too much of this stuff off. The more you get off, the better it looks, the better the finish is. Flip her over, do the top side, and listen to me talk in the audio. What the audio? I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm going to talk into the camera here in a minute, so I'm going to stop this voiceover now. But if you made it this far, thanks for watching. That's how you make a bunch of money in a short amount of time off of a little bench. And that's that. That was about 5 hours work, and I was able to charge $1,550 for this little guy. And yeah, it's not a bad what? Effort to return ratio. So pretty easy.